Hey everyone, so over the past year or so, one of the more popular videos on this channel was my Factory 5 how much does it cost video. And I got a lot of comments asking, well, what if I used a donor Mustang? How much would it cost then? And I thought I'd try and put something together here to capture that. For my build, I tried to balance quality with cost, and if I ever had to pick one over the other, I almost always picked quality. Now you can build a quality Cobra using a donor. And the best way to get there is to find the cheapest, best condition Mustang you can. And in a lot of ways, that's going to be your biggest challenge if you decide to take that route. But if you find a good one at the right price, you should probably buy it, because not only is it going to save you some build time, it's also going to save you some money. Well, how much money is it going to save? Well, let's find out, and we'll compare what I paid out of pocket buying parts versus what it would cost if I found myself a good donor. First, we're going to nail down two sunk costs, and number one is the price of a base kit with delivery, and I'm using $14,190 for that. And second is the price I paid to buy myself a good 5.0 donor. Based on what you see on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist these days, I think a good price for a 5.0 is usually $3 to $5 grand. So let's pretend that you were able to steal Grandma's 5.0 for a mere $3,000. This 5.0 right here, yeah, you ain't getting it for $3 grand. In fact, if you got that for $3 grand, I won't even touch it. Just drive it or resell it, because that thing's perfect. Alright, let's start the cost comparison. Frame powder coat and the body cutouts. You can do both of these yourself, no problem. But I am going to roll in a $100 paint fee in place of the powder coating. We're going to use the spindles and lower control arms off the Mustang donor, but one note guys, this setup is more susceptible to bump steer because the geometry of the Mustang is slightly different than the Factory 5, and as a result it's going to handle it a little differently, so just a heads up there. Similarly in the back, we're going to use the donor's rear control arms and drum brakes. Now something to note here too, another change. You'll see the large coilovers, you're going to have to fabricate some kind of spring perch in place of the coilover's bolt-in location. Not a huge deal, but that's just another difference you got to be aware of. Shorty headers from your Mustang will bolt right up, but one difference is you have to use a J-pipe, and that's an intermediate pipe between the shorty headers and the side pipes. And a side note for you guys that live in emission states, that's where you would typically put the catalytic converters. Radiator out of your Mustang, sure, use that. It'll work, bolt it up, move on. Regarding the hood hinges, so for me that was a convenience buy. And the reason I bought those is if you use the safety pins, every time you open the hood you got to put that hood somewhere. And that's usually when your kid scratches it with their bike or the wind blows it across the yard. And just that was something I didn't want to deal with, so that's why I went with the hinges. Okay, next item, the rear end. Sure, that'll drop right out of the donor and that'll bolt up into your kit. But two items you're going to want to be aware of. The first, you're going to want to know the rear end gear ratio so you can set up the car, whether it be for highway cruising or for auto crossing, depending on what you're going to do with the car. You're going to want to know what ratio's in there. And then secondly, the Fox Mustangs, a lot of them came with 4 lug axles, and that's going to really limit your wheel selection. And that's why on my build I moved to those 5 lug Mosers. Everything you see in the next section here you can pull right out of your donor. So the rack, the gas tank, the pedal box, the brakes. But one item I wouldn't skimp on is get a different clutch quadrant. So the nylon clutch quadrant that came with the Fox Mustangs and some of the SN95s, it was terrible. It stripped or it didn't work right. That's something I would definitely upgrade, so let's add $40 for a new quadrant. Moving on to the motor, so this is an area where you can really save a lot of money using a donor. But the key again is going to be able to find a good one that hasn't been abused. If you can find Grandma's 5.0 that had a T5 and a solid late model 5.0 roller, I'd go for that in a heartbeat. You'll save a ton of money. You don't have to hassle with opening up a motor. Now I'm going to come clean here. I like working on motors, so this wasn't a bad thing for me to pick up a cheap junkyard 5.0 and rebuild it. But again, big picture, if you're going for a budget build and you want a reliable car, this is the area where you're going to save the most using a donor vehicle. Now even if you have a good donor powertrain, I'm going to add in an additional $500 here, and here's why. Now during the swap, whether you like it or not, you're probably going to need some belts, hoses, maybe engine mounts. There's just going to be some parts you're going to need to put that motor and transmission in. And there might be some maintenance things too, like spark plugs, plug cables, maybe a new clutch. And these are costs that we need to account for. On to wiring. Sure, pull the wiring harness out of your donor, put it into your build. but a heads up, there's still going to be some custom configuration and splicing you're going to have to do. Can be done though, and we won't have a cost here. On to tires. You're going to buy tires, you're not going to use your donor tires, so we're just going to leave the cost here. And as far as the paint job, I don't think you can beat what I paid out of pocket here, so we'll just match that prices for the primer and the finish coat. As for the interior, we'll just use the Factory 5 supplied parts, so no cost here. And as far as gauges, you're going to use your 5.0 gauges. They're not flashy, but they'll work, and we won't have a cost here either. So regarding the raw materials like the aluminum and steel here, I'm going to up this to $300 because the reality is if you use a donor, you're going to have to do some more custom fab, and it might even include some materials beyond what I used. Okay, we are at the cost roll up, and you'll see when we tally the numbers, using a donor saves us about 10 grand, and that's a pretty good savings. But I'm going to say it again here, this is all predicated on you finding a nice donor. Because the reality is you're not going to want to put rusty parts on your Cobra build or a beat up engine. And if you did, you're just not going to be happy with the end product. So in closing, show me your 20 grand Cobra build. I think it can be done. It's going to take some patience, a lot of part clean, some extra hours in the garage. But it'd be really neat to see a quality build come in under 20K. Maybe a challenge for Taco Joe is to pull off the 20K GT40 build. Think I could do it? Thanks for watching.